Welcome to the Kickin podcast. Today we are joined by Lisa for an episode entitled Unlocking Creativity. Thanks for listening and enjoy.
So I was a teacher. I was a special education teacher for 20 years, and I really felt a calling to that. I had some volunteer work in high school that really touched my heart and made me commit to that as my career. So I was a special education teacher for 20 years, and then my last 16 years of teaching, I taught first grade. And I had kind of a surprise in my life when, I guess it was about 11 years ago, I, out of the blue, started a business. And it wasn't a plan that I ever intended to have. I made art for my house because I had, at that point, my house had a lot of my grandmother's Victorian furniture and her Victorian art, and it wasn't me. And I put it into estate sales and let it go and realized that I didn't have any art on the walls in my house, so I was going to paint some pictures, and I went to Hobby Lobby to get canvas and paint to paint a picture, and I couldn't afford it. I was a single mom and a teacher, and money was tight. So I stood there in Hobby Lobby and looked to see what I could find that I could afford, and all I could afford was paper. So I bought bright colored paper and I brought it home, and I cut these bright fun designs and I put them in frames in my living room, and it just started to change my environment. A before and after picture of my house is hard to describe. It went from being very beige and no color to a house that is just very colorful, and it all just started by me making that art. The fact that I did it with cut paper was absolutely random. It turned out that that was the best way for me to express myself. And I did make some Christmas cards then the following year for my friends and family, and I decided to try to do it with cut paper. And I tried to figure it out. It took some trial and error, but I did it, and it turned out really cute, and everyone loved it. And so the next 2 years I did ones that went with the original one, and at that point a friend took those cards to a gift shop and asked if they wanted to sell them, and they did. And I didn't know anything about having a business. So actually my business started before I even knew I had a business. But the gift shop was interested in selling them, so I had to figure out even how to do that. In the meantime, some other friends went to some more stores, so I had 4 stores right from the beginning that I was selling cards at, and I had to figure out a name for my business and a logo. I had to figure out pricing and packaging, and I did that. And that very first Christmas I got all those cards delivered and thought, well, that was that. And one of the stores called the next day and said that they'd sold out in one day. And at that point I knew this had more energy and life to it than I had realized, and I just started to hang on for dear life, and the business has had a life of its own. And now this is 11 years that this has gone on.
But all of your original art is done only with cut paper.
Only with cut paper. And just with some kind of regular scissors. I don't have any snazzy equipment. And I think that's part of the charm, that you can tell that there's a lot of heart and craftsmanship that goes into what I do. And I sketch it first, and then I use tracing paper and carbon paper, and then I start to cut out all the pieces and put the pieces together into hundreds of designs now.
You've made over 300 cards.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you get your inspiration?
Well, as I'm sitting here in my studio, I'm facing this wall in my studio that has almost all of my cards on it. So I have a really good vantage point right now of looking at this. When I look at that wall, it's my life. I'm looking at my grandfather, I'm looking at my dog, I'm looking at my mother's home. I see my grandmother in her wedding dress. I see my father dressed up for Halloween. I see my son, my sister's house, my church. I mean, it comes from everywhere. And I would say a big part of it, of my aesthetic and the way that people look at it, you can tell that I spent a lot of time with children. There's a lot of color. It's real optimistic and joyful. It's not serious. A lot of the inspiration comes from all those years I spent in the classroom with kids. And when I first started doing this, and of course I had never really thought about doing greeting cards until one of the stores at a museum, the buyer said, because I started just with Christmas cards, she said, I'd like to see what you do with all kinds of cards, birthday and wedding, sympathy or whatever. And when she said that, it's so weird because it's almost like literally I saw this door open and I looked through this door and there were all these ideas. I mean, it's like all those years that I was doing other things and teaching and being a mom and, just years and years of living, I was squirreling away all these ideas, and then I found this endless pool. And it's still there. I mean, I can open that door right now in my imagination and I have 20 different ideas that come to mind right this very second, even after doing 300. So it's just an accumulation, I guess.
So you really tell your story in these cards.
Yeah. But what I have found over the years is people take it and they get what they need out of it. I've had people reach out to me and say, there's this one, well, here's an example, this one card that I love and I have it at home and I would like to buy more of those cards. And the message on the card says, gather memories like flowers. And it's just a real simple, beautiful bouquet, bright colors, and it's on a black background. And inside it says, and celebrate a beautiful life. Well, by the way, that took a long time to figure out the exact wording on that. It's a sympathy card, but people do use it for other things. Anyway, this gal who contacted me, she said, I would like to buy a number of them, and if it's possible, because I've just been diagnosed with a really aggressive brain tumor, and I would like to write my final messages to my family on those cards.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, that was incredible. Her husband brought her over here, and she spent an afternoon at my home and see my studio and everything, and I gave her a framed print of it, and I gave her the cards that she wanted. And at the time I was really debating about really going out of my comfort zone with my business and going to some national markets and things, and I shared with her how nervous I was about doing that, and she said, please do. You don't realize who you're touching or how you're touching people, because once they leave you, those cards are out there in the world. And she said, from someone who knows how much they mean, please extend yourself and do it. And those kinds of things kind of make all of it make sense to me. I mean, they're greeting cards, and at first I thought, okay, so I'm doing Santa Claus or whatever. It's so much more, because these little stories, I guess I would say, they're almost like little short stories, little vignettes. They're out there on a shelf in a store, and people are glancing through those cards, and I have maybe 1 second to make a connection with that person. They find what it is, they pick it up, they see what it says, and they buy it. I mean, that is huge. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that. So they buy it, but then that's not the end of the story. There's a reason they bought it. There's somebody that's going to receive it. So then they send it on its journey and it goes somewhere, someone else gets it, and they react to it. I mean, that's a whole chain of superhuman things that are all happening that I've played a part in. I mean, I just feel honored to be part of that.
I wondered, as you were talking about how the story that you just told about the lady who was sending final messages via your cards, and then also just thinking about the fact that so many of the cards are portrayals of your life experiences. Do you feel like there's a lot of vulnerability in releasing these cards, and or at least maybe in the beginning, did it feel like you had to be pretty vulnerable to put yourself out there and see if it would be received and how it would be received?
Oh, absolutely. It's super scary. I can remember in junior high taking an art class. I hated it. I had no self-confidence, of course, at age 12 or whatever. The reason I didn't like it is because you are so vulnerable. Well, that doesn't change any, from being 12 years old to being almost 66 now. It's still a real scary thing to put yourself out there as an artist, and I'm sure any kind of artist would say that that's true. It's so personal, and you put so much into it, and then it goes out into the world, and you hope that what you're trying to say and the reason you've done it, that somebody will connect to it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you're able to say things through art that you maybe couldn't say through words?
Yes. When I'm looking at my cards and I'm thinking of some of the bigger pieces that I've done, most of what I do, like I said, is really optimistic and joyful and has a hopeful message. But I've also done some art that goes a little bit deeper than that. There's a piece that I'm thinking of that I have in my home that was inspired by, how would I say this? Letting go of things in my life that maybe weren't healthy or good for me. And, a major piece that I did was inspired by that. And it's just in the image you can see that that's what it's about, letting go and taking control of your life.
So there's a business aspect, but maybe also a little bit of a therapeutic aspect to it as well, right?
Oh, there is. When I first started, I could hardly do it fast enough. The ideas were just pounding their ways out. It sounds so weird, but I can remember just being so focused. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I never spend time just sitting around trying to figure out what to do, because there's always an idea to start. And as long as I've got those ideas, and as long as people enjoy them and I can keep connecting, that's what I hope.
And I imagine that at age 65, your life experiences have allowed you to bring more to the table than had you tried to create this business at age 30.
Absolutely. Someone asked me one time, aren't you sorry that this happened later in your life? And it took me a minute. I thought about it. In one way, yes. I mean, it would have been interesting to see if this started when I was in my 20s, how far I could have taken this. But that didn't happen. So from the very get-go, I knew my runway was short. That's just a reality. So because of that, I have gone at this with a lot more energy and enthusiasm than if, say, I had 30 years to do it. I have made decisions based on that. I'm not going to wait and see if I want to do it maybe next year, or put something off and see if it might make more sense later on. Or I have always felt an urgency to do things now. And like you said, life experience, I'm sitting here looking at that wall of cards. I don't know what would be on that wall if I had tried to do this when I was 20. I mean, I don't even want to know. This is all about life experience in looking at it in total right there. I couldn't have done it.